do whatever you want. Whatever make you comfortable. Yep. Then I give it a couple of minutes so that people can come on because they edit all of this. And just make sure that you speak up. I used to do the mics and all that. We do it's more with sweat and work with them things. I just have them edit this out later. I wait until we get at least 10 people on. Okay. We'll get right into it. Yep, and that's just the main thing. You have to show you got a real soft disposition. Just make sure you speak up. Because people do, they need to hear this. Oh my goodness. We got three people on. I'm gonna give them a couple of minutes.
Oh, really? Drink some water?
Of course you can. Look, on this side, it's whatever. Whatever makes you comfortable. Hey guys, we're gonna be starting in a couple of minutes. You guys don't forget to hit the share button. It's gonna be a lot of good information this evening. And lastly, do you want to introduce yourself? When I say this is Darryl Webster, do you want to give us a rundown?
Yeah.
Okay, you guys, I want to welcome you all to another episode of Let's Talk with Ro. Tonight, we want to welcome Darryl Webster. Darryl, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, thank you, Ro. Thank you for having me. My name is Darryl Webster. I'm a fourth generation Washingtonian. I've been a school social worker, DC Public Schools, for nearly 30 years. I have three wonderful children married to my high school sweetheart, and I've been very active in the community as an advocate for mental health for a very long time.
Well, look, and I know that's just a short piece of all you have going. Darryl, I want to say thank you so much for taking time to come on tonight. And tonight we're going to be discussing how you deal with trauma and what trauma looks like in our community and how so much trauma is unaddressed. And it is just a wonderful thing that you are working in this field because it's so necessary. Right now, anxiety and depression is tearing our communities down. I believe it's the root of a lot of the troubles that we're having. So we're not gonna waste any time. We're gonna get right into it because this hour it passes so fast, Darryl. So you wrote a book, and your book is called.
I thought I was going crazy.
Okay, so in your book, I thought I was going crazy. That could mean a lot of different things to people. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote the book. I thought I was going crazy because in my 20s, I experienced something I'd never experienced before in my life. I went through a stage where I had anxiety disorders. I had social anxiety disorders, panic attacks, something called agoraphobia, where you're afraid to leave your house, coupled with major depression disorder and all disorders. All those mental illnesses combined literally made me thought I was going crazy. There are over 200 different symptoms or more related to anxiety disorder, and someone could experience any number of those. And one of them is when you feel like you're going crazy because of the physiological and the mental types of challenges it causes to the brain and to the body.
Oh my goodness! Now we're gonna definitely get deeper into that. But tell me a little bit about your childhood. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Northwest DC for those Washingtonians, over near Ben's Chili Bowl in the U Street Shaw area. I grew up in the 70s, right after the death of Martin Luther King. My neighborhood in that short area was devastated by blight. After the riots of Martin Luther King, everything was set on fire. White flight happened. White people moved out of the neighborhood, and the neighborhood went down. Drugs, prostitution, crime moved in. But I was fortunate; I had grandparents that loved me. But we didn't have a lot of support in that neighborhood at the time, and I noticed the mental illness that set in because there wasn't a lot of support. So when you have poverty, crime, drugs, and prostitution, a lot of bad stuff come with it. And I saw a lot of anxiety and depression result as a result of it.
That's interesting. So back then, right? Let's get into some deep rooted facts about you. So when you were a child, did your mom raise you? And if she didn't, tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
that situation.
When I was a child, my grandparents, they were the salt of the earth people, very loving. They raised me, my brother and cousin. Not only did they raise me, they raised a single mother who had been involved in a domestic violence situation. My grandparents took that family and then raised her with her kids as well. My mother wasn't involved because she went away to nursing school. And when I was 2 years old, she told me recently that she went to give me away to another family, that she wasn't sure if she wanted a child. She was very ambivalent. And so she struggled with that. And she went to Pittsburgh to turn me over to another family. And in the middle of the night, her conscience got the best of her. She said, I don't know if I can give my child away. And she brought me back to the D.C. area. And when she brought me back, she still didn't know if she wanted a child because she wanted a career and she didn't want a child at the time. But I felt that ambivalence as an infant. I felt being unwanted and uncared for. And all my life, that type of not wanting me has impacted me my whole life.
Okay, wow. Daryl, can you get that, please? I don't need to hear you on that. We'll edit that out. Now that's wild. So with that being said, when you look back on that and your mom is just giving you that kind of information, how does that affect you in later years? Did that contribute at all to the things that you went through mentally?
Wow, bro, that's a great question. When she told me that information recently, it really shed a lot of light on the challenges I had from the time I was very young and all the way through my teenage years to my young adult years. I kind of connected the dots. When I have relationships with people, sometimes the slightest thing would make me feel unwanted or make me feel like they didn't like me for some reason. I never quite understood why I would personalize these types of slights with people. But when I looked at what they call the attachment signs, when a person doesn't have that secure attachment with their mother or primary caregiver as an infant, it sets the tone, the trajectory for your whole life, psychologically, emotionally, physiologically, and even biologically. And it made a lot of sense to me. And so I thank her for that. But at the same time, and also understanding that a lot of mothers love their children, but when they're young, they don't exactly know whether they can take care of a child. Maybe their mother didn't give them the skills in terms of how to raise a child. It's not that they're bad parents. I would think most mothers are very loving, caring, and want to do the best by their child. But life conditions would have it, it makes it very problematic. And when you're really stressed, it really interferes with the mothering instinct.
This is so interesting because as we all, in our adulthood now can look back and see, okay, you see some moms that are really nurturing and they hold their babies. And I've even heard moms say things like, I'm not holding that baby. Let him cry. Have you ever heard things like
I
that?
talk about that in my book.
Oh wow. So that's gonna be good.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so you just like, what are you supposed to do? Because now the information is coming forward
Yes.
about how this affects us later in life.
Yes.
This is important
Yeah.
and it makes so much sense. You picture that. An infant is automatically gonna want love from something. We all want to be loved. And if you just sitting there crying
Right.
and your needs not being
Yes.
met, I can just see you being attracted to that later.
Yeah.
Just
So I mean, Ro, I talk about that in my book. Um, one of the things, parenting types of behaviors that was talked about or was done back during the 70s was when babies cried. In my family, the mothers was told to let the babies cry out. Don't spoil that baby. Let that baby cry because you need to train that baby to sleep through the night. And if you pick that baby up, you're going to spoil the baby, and the baby will expect you to pick it up, and they'll constantly cry. But so you're hurting the baby. But now we know with attachment signs, that's one of the most worst things you can do is let a crying baby cry it out. Because when a baby's crying, that baby's cry is their need to feel connected, to feel nurtured, to feel loved. And when you give them that type of attachment and secure love, they will calm down. They will stop crying. They're crying because they want something. They want to feel supported. They want to feel loved. They want to be what they call attuned, to be cared for. And when you don't give them that and you let them cry for a long time without picking them up, guess what happens? Yeah, they stop crying. But when they stop crying, they're telling you, I give up. You don't love me. You don't care. You're not going to hear this crying anymore. And that sets the trajectory for their whole life of feeling unwanted and
Oh
uncared
my
for.
goodness. That that is big. So what did your anxiety and your depression symptoms look like when you were in high school and going into early adulthood?
In high school, I had undiagnosed anxiety and depression. I wasn't aware of it at the time, but I do recall I never went anywhere. I didn't go to football games. Although I played on the basketball team, that was the only time I really had social interaction. But I didn't go to football games. I didn't go to dances. I didn't go out to restaurants. I didn't do any of the social things kids in high school. That's a big time to do a lot of social stuff in high school. And I basically stayed with my girlfriend, and I didn't go anywhere. And looking back on it, I realized it was something called social anxiety disorder, which is the fear of going around people for fear of being judged or being ridiculed or being mocked in some type of way. I didn't have the language or understanding about it, but now as an adult, I realized that I did have social anxiety disorder.
Wow. So it's just like a sense of dread or a sense of something bad is going to happen if I go around people.
Well, social anxiety disorder is more involved feeling judged or criticized when other people, when you're around people, thinking people are looking you up and down and finding some flaw in you. That sense of dread of worrying when the next shoe going to drop and not knowing why, that's more of a generalized anxiety disorder. You don't really have a specific thing that you're worrying about, but you're just constantly fretting every little thing. That's general anxiety disorder. There's a distinction between the two.
Woo. So with the generalized, I believe they call it GAD.
GAD, yes.
So with GAD, right? See, I'm learning. You sound like you have a psychology degree. I'm in school, I'm
Yeah,
a student,
yeah,
but GAD is
yeah,
interesting. And, I like to get to the root of these things because we like to know where this
yes,
stuff comes from.
right, right.
So when we're talking about generalized anxiety disorder, because we see there are so many young people,
Mm-hmm.
well, just people in general,
Yeah,
especially since the pandemic, they're starting to just stay in the house.
yeah, oh, yeah,
People
yeah,
are afraid to
yeah,
come out.
yeah,
They're feeling this sense of dread. I
right,
mean, I'm hearing
right,
them talk about
yeah,
it. They're just nervous
yeah,
about going anywhere because they're scared something's
yeah.
going to happen.
One of the main features of that runs through anxiety disorders is fear and avoidance. Fear and avoidance. So people, because of the COVID-19 situation, a lot of people are fearing that they're going to get COVID, and they're avoiding certain situations in public around other people. They're wearing their masks like you because they're afraid that they may get it because we know that if you get it, it could mean death. And so it creates a lot of angst and anxiety for a lot of people for obvious reasons. And so it's understandable. One thing about our nervous systems, it's built into our nervous systems to protect us from all types of dangers.
Come
So
on now,
so
help
so,
us.
so when there's a
You are helping
danger,
us.
when there's a danger out there, we all share the same nervous system, the same brain and the spinal cord and all the different nerves. And there's even a nerve called a cranial nerve, the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is very in tune to safety. When you're around someone or if you're feeling unsafe, the vagus nerve runs from the back of your brain and it runs and touches on every organ in your body. And when you feel unsafe, that vagus nerve is telling you, be careful, safety, 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 get to safety. And if I'm with you, that vagus nerve is outside of my conscious awareness is telling me I don't trust this person because the vagus nerve is looking at very small nuances in your eyes and your facial structure, and it can pick up whether or not that person is safe to be around or not.
Wow. And I'm sure people that are looking can relate to
Oh
that
yeah.
because it makes so much sense. It's just that you're breaking down the science
Mm-hmm.
portion of it. You're making it plain for us. Wow. So in your book, you talk about different techniques to help people.
Yeah.
How exactly do you feel like your book will be able
Yeah.
to help?
My book, my personal experience in itself has a lot of lessons that very young kids, mothers, fathers, especially in the black community, mental health is something we seem to want to avoid. We want to pray it away or we want to self-medicate it away, whether it be smoking, drinking. Some of us, not all of us, because some people take a very proactive, positive approach to dealing with their anxiety, like exercising, which is a great way of handling anxiety. Why? Because when we're stressed, a part of our nervous system called the sympathetic nervous system, it gets activated, it gets real frazzled. And a great way to lessen the cortisol that is empty into our body is to exercise because it burns off. It's almost like naturally puts you into that fight or flight response, but it's in a more of a positive way. Meditation. I've been meditating since I first learned I had anxiety, like going into a quiet space, focusing on the breath. Because one thing about the breath is always present with us. You try to stop breathing for a minute, and you'll realize how important the breath is. So people need to learn how to get in contact with the breath and watch what they're eating, because certain foods can create anxiety as well.
I'm about to make you laugh, okay? Okay, we got some. We're gonna go to the audience
Yes.
for a second. We're gonna give some shout outs to the audience. Hey, Mrs. Pope, how are you? Anton, Sherry. Oh my goodness, we got Jonathan Hancock. I can't even call everybody out, but thank you guys for stopping by tonight. Anton, Anton says, do you feel that trauma affects who you fall for in relationships or creates the type of person you're attracted to?
I think based on my experience in social work and being a therapist, trauma definitely has some aspects where people tend to pick people who were similar to the person who victimized them. In some regard, you wonder, you go, why did this person go back into another relationship that was similar to the traumatizing relationship to only experience the same type of abuse and so forth? For some reason, people who don't learn that type of pattern, they tend to seek out those types of relationships, and it's maladaptive and it's not productive, but it happens a lot.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, as I look back over my
Mm-hmm.
life, my mom wasn't really, she wasn't there. My mom wasn't a hands on mother. She didn't raise me.
Right.
So, long story short, it seems like as you grow into adulthood, you start to reach for people that are inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was very inconsistent. So, do you think that's the reason why initially I could have been reaching for people that weren't consistent?
I think we all tend to approach things that we're familiar with. Familiarity attracts us, whether it be even if it's something dysfunctional. We're familiar with the dysfunctional, even though it's like they call it oxymoron. It seems paradoxical, but you're going through the same thing you went through as a child in this very toxic relationship with your mother or with your dad or with your siblings. Now you're an adult, you're picking the same type of people that that you went through that relationship, because people who do that don't have the skills or insight to see what they're doing. But they find themselves in these patterns over and over with those same types of people. Only through insight and therapy or through bibliotherapy, reading about your personality, can you become aware and get yourself out of those types of trenches of dysfunction.
Yeah, because once you look at it, I get a lot of people that say things like, "Why do I want this person?"
Yes.
They'll be in these relationships and they say, "Why do I
Mm-hmm.
want this person?" And I think that, like you said, as they get educated
Yeah.
on these specifically
Yeah.
attachment
Mm-hmm.
styles, they can really get to the
Yeah.
root of it and they can understand it
Yes.
better. That's interesting. So, question: How normal do you think it is to be sitting in a room with someone that is suffering from anxiety and depression? I mean, you're sitting in the same room with this person. They appear to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
They're having conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes some of them are quiet, and they are completely suffering. In their mind, they're looking around the room, and they think they're having thoughts of death. They're scared somebody might come in the room with a gun and shoot it up. How normal do you think it is for people to be sitting in a room with you and you have no idea that they're going through anxiety?
Hey, Ro, that's a very good question. I say it's very normal. It's very normal. I was one of those people. I was one of those people. I would be around a person like you, and on the inside, I was suffering from anxiety. I would sit in places and literally want to literally get up and run out of there because of panic attacks. I felt, but the person couldn't see it. They call it in my profession. They call it internalizing behaviors. Anxiety is something you really can't see. It's not like an externalizing behavior where someone is acting out doing something. It's all internal. And anxiety is one of those things. So it's very normal. I'll give you an example. I've spoken at a number of places lately, different venues, and after every talk, about 3 or 4 people come up to me and say, "Thank you for that talk on mental health. I'm taking medication for this. I'm dealing with depression. I'm dealing with anxiety. I'm so glad that you brought that up because we don't want to talk about it. You basically normalize what I'm going through." It's very pervasive and it's very people. Yes, we need to understand. It's okay to not be okay. Now, Naomi Osaka said it, the tennis star who was going through anxiety and depression. We are human. We're going through stresses in life. We all are going through something in this life. Life is not easy. We're going to endure these things, and when we endure these things, it's important that you have a supportive, nurturing, caring person in your life that can buffer you and give you the support you need. Don't struggle in silence by self-medicating with drugs or alcohol or over-sexing or whatever people are doing to mask those symptoms, because the problem is still going to be there. Get the proper support, because like me, it's been 25 years since I went through anxiety disorders, depression, and I had pretty much all of those that I talked about, and I haven't had a relapse since. So you can overcome it. Don't make yourself feel bad and beat yourself up. Show yourself some grace and get the support you need, because it's normal to go through these things in some regard.
That is so, I love that you said that you got over it. You got
Yeah.
through it. Because some people go through anxiety, first of all. And I mean, when I say suffering, what do you think about the term flourishing?
I love it. I like to consider myself and many people like me as post traumatic growth people. We don't have post traumatic stress disorder. We have post traumatic growth. I went through some traumatic things, but now I've grown. I've evolved. I've emerged. I've flourished. I've flourished into someone who is educated, who's aware, who has insights, someone who's taking his knowledge out and helping the masses of people who are struggling with this issue. I mean, I love it in my profession when I talk to people and they say, Mr. Webster, thank you so much for helping me talk about that. You sharing your story has lessened my anxiety to an umpteenth degree, because I never knew that this was normal. I thought I was going crazy. And I was trying to explain it, no, you're not going crazy. And I talked to you earlier about when we're so overwhelmed in our brains and in our bodies and in our hearts and our spirits, our minds, what they call disassociate. It goes numb, and it has something to do with that vagus nerve. But it's kind of like the circuit breaker in your house clicking off when the system is overpowered with too much stuff on it. The circuit breaker cut off and the lights go off. Well, our brains go offline when we're dealing with too many stresses, too much stuff that's overwhelming. The brain go, whoa, it's too much for you right now. I'm going to disassociate you, make you feel numb. I'm going to literally going to make you feel like you're going crazy, but you're not going crazy. It's just the body way of adapting, unfortunately, in a maladaptive way to high levels of stress and anxiety.
Oh my goodness, this is just so, it's just like eye opening to talk about it. And at what point did you decide that you needed to go get some help? Like, what was the breaking point?
When I was in my 20s, my mother, ironically, was trained as a psychiatric nurse. She used to work at the Veteran Administration Hospital with war people who come back from war who were dealing with PTSD, and she worked at St. Elizabeth's Hospital that used to be open years ago for the mentally insane. And I was picking her up at the airport when I first started experiencing these types of symptoms. And I was one of those people. I was kind of afraid to tell her, but no matter how old we are, we always go back to our mothers. Our mothers, they're the source of nurturing, and we look for them for advice, at least in my case. And I picked her up at the airport, and she came out of the airport with not a care in the world. She was smiling, and I was feeling the worst I could possibly feel that day. I had feelings of anxiety, depression. Life didn't have no meaning to me. And she got in the car, and I said, I, I'm not feeling like myself. I'm feeling weird. I'm feeling out of my body. I'm like, I'm not even on this planet. And she turned to me and she said, I think you're going crazy. And it freaked me out because she's a
She
mental
said
health, yeah,
it
she's a mental health
of
person.
all the things.
Exactly. And so when she said it, being a sensitive person as I was, I internalized it. I literally thought, and thought I was going crazy because she said it. I'm thinking I must be going crazy. But what she didn't understand, or what I didn't understand all those years back then, was anxiety symptoms and depression symptoms mimic making you feel like you're going crazy. And so even though she was in the field, goes to show you, you can have people in that field, but still not have all the depth of knowledge that they need to give real good advice at critical times. That's why I say in my book, be careful who you seek advice from, because some people, unbeknownst, even so-called experts, could give you the misinformation that could send you in the wrong path.
Yes, and you know what I've noticed, Daryl? A lot of times, if people have not been through anxiety and depression, they are less sensitive to certain
Yeah.
things, and they will say things that will just tick you off way more.
I talk about that in my book.
Oh my
Yeah, they
goodness.
talk, and I tell people, I've heard people say, I don't want to talk about it because I don't want people to think I'm weak. I don't want to talk about it because people are gonna think I'm crazy. You know, those type of stigmas. We need to destigmatize mental illness. We need to normalize it and make people understand it's just the body's physiological, biological response to life stress. We all are dealing with the stress of life. Yes, we all react in our own different ways. That is true. But when it takes us there, our minds will react in that very weird way that makes us feel like we're going crazy. Guys, you're not going crazy. You're dealing with high levels of anxiety and in some cases depression. It's very treatable. There are all types of evidence-based practices and interventions out there that can get your life back, to get your mental back. Trust and reach out to someone who can give you great advice and support, and most importantly, lean on someone that has a good rational mind that can give you some good advice. But don't do inappropriate things to self-medicate because that's the wrong way to go.
And I'm gonna tell you, that is like you're hitting a major point right there. I know people that have been smoking weed for years, and they say things. And I know because I smoked weed for a good 10 years. I'm gonna tell you, I probably was high for a good 10 years straight. I'm not joking, Darryl. I would get up in the morning, I would smoke, and I was high all day. And as soon as I got home, as long as I had the weed, I didn't go out anywhere. I didn't do anything. But without it, I felt like I was going crazy because I had to deal with the anxiety. So, guys, it's really a serious thing. If you are drinking every day, if you are smoking weed every day, I don't care what anybody say. Y'all might be a little pissed with me on this one, but you should evaluate. If you can't go a day without it, or every time you go without it, you feel yourself itching and scrambling to get it, you masking something.
Yes, I agree. You're masking, and it's an addiction, and you want to be available, emotionally, psychologically, for your loved ones, for your girlfriends, boyfriends, husbands, wives, for your children. You don't want to spend all your days under the influence of some type of substance because you're not going to be able to make the connections you need to get your mental back to where it needs to be. And the longer you stay addicted to any substance or even a behavior for that matter, gambling, oversexing, whatever you're doing, just to numb yourself from the pain, it's stopping you from living a full and rich life and from getting to a place you need to get to just to really live life without going through those types of challenges.
It's interesting though because people don't think like that. I didn't think like that. I'm gonna tell you, you guys. I remember when we living in a society now where they say that weed has medicinal purposes and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And I agree to a certain extent. If it's helping you for your pain and
Mm-hmm.
things like that, hey, do what you gotta do. But for me, when I was smoking and I was high like that for that decade, you guys, it caused me to do so much procrastinating.
Mm-hmm.
I was masking so many things. And to be honest, looking back, all of that time that I was smoking weed, it held me back from healing, from
Mm-hmm.
things that I was going through. And I still had to heal.
Right, right.
So it's like it put me in the hole.
How'd you
That
make the breakthrough?
you know what I did? Well, for me, everybody's breakthrough comes different.
Right.
But for me, it was God. God was like, He called me. And when I started going to church and I started reading the word, things started falling
Mm-hmm.
off of me. God was replacing that void for me.
Right.
Everybody is different, but He made it so that I couldn't enjoy doing things that I used to do anymore.
Right. Right.
Like He called me off of that weed. But the point is, when I stopped smoking that
Yeah.
weed, Darryl, the first year I stopped smoking weed, I went back and got my high school
Oh,
diploma.
wow.
I got my hair license and I opened up a business. I mean,
That's
just in
awesome.
1 year.
That's awesome.
It just shows you how much you guys that stuff can hold you back. You have all these ideas inside of you, and it causes some people can thrive with it, so they think, but to me, it really holds you back.
Right.
It really does. Oh my goodness, that was good. Let me see if we have any questions from the audience. Hey, Lamp, it's good to see you. Lamp has a show. He's a good guy. So, in your book, you mentioned the adverse, the childhood study,
Yeah.
aka ACEs study, in your book. What is that
Yeah,
study about?
Adverse Childhood Experiences study was done in the mid 1990s. Vincent Felitti and Robbie Anders, two medical doctors, they were doing research. Well, Felitti, anyway, he was working with Kaiser Permanente medical clinic, and he noticed his obese clients who were like 300 or 400 pounds or more who lost weight. They were putting the weight back on relatively quickly. He couldn't understand Like, why were they gaining the weight so fast after they worked so hard to get it off? And so one day when he was talking with one of his clients, he asked, he said, well, how old were you when you weighed like a normal weight? And the woman said, I was 13 or 12 or something like that. It was something like that. And he said, he was puzzled. He said, 12 or 13, like when she weighed like 100 and something pounds. And he couldn't understand why she was so young. And she said, that was right before the time my father sexually abused me. And he was like, he was kind of stepped back and he was trying to understand, hmm. So she put on a weight as a way to protect herself from being sexually abused again. And then he said, well, let me find out if this is something that's going on with my other obese clients. And then when he asked them, a lot of them, a significant number of them, have been sexually abused by different people at a young age, and they had put on the weight as a protective mechanism for making themselves unattractive so that they wouldn't be sexually abused. And it was an eye opening for him. And then he went to some of his colleagues and he told them about his revelation and his findings. And he said, I'd like to find out if these adverse childhood experiences like sexual abuse or child neglect, living in a house with someone with mental health, serious mental health issue, or a house where the parents are divorced. There was 10 different ACEs questions that he surveyed 27,000 something Kaiser members. And he came to find out that a significant number of them had 4 or more ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And he was really surprised because his the people he interviewed were white middle class people, and they didn't fit the profile. Because when you think about people with problems, you always say black people got the problem, but these were white people. 70% of them were white, and they had went through all these 4 or more ACEs, where you have been sexually abused, physically abused, emotionally abused, physically neglected, emotionally neglected. Is someone in your house had a mental illness, been separated due to divorce? Did someone die in your family when you were young? Was there domestic violence in your house? Were your mother being beat up by a husband or a boyfriend or whatever? And was someone incarcerated? Those are like the 10 ACEs questions. And it blew his mind. So since then, they realized that if you had three or more, or 4 or more adverse childhood experiences. Don't quote me on the exact number, but depending on how many adverse childhood experiences you had as a young person, it correlated to a lifetime of mental, emotional, physical problems and health-related problems. People who have 4 or more ACEs had cancer, cardiovascular disease, autoimmune diseases, all types of health problems. These are people who, even in some cases, never even smoke or drink. Why? Because that stress response that is in all of us, due to the amount of stress we have as children, that stress response gets cut on in our bodies, and it stays on. And it's based on how many ACEs you had in your life. So if you got people in your home who never drank and never smoked, and they may be feelings are rare with high blood pressure. You go, why is my pressure so high? Think, go online, guys, and look up the Adverse Childhood Experiences study. There is a study, there is a test that you can take to determine how high your ACEs score is. And if you have a high Adverse Childhood Experiences score, it correlates with a lifelong impact on your physical health, emotional health, even relationships. Because if you grew up in a house where there was a lot of dysfunction and your mother was getting beat by the father or boyfriend, you internalize that stuff. And if no one taught you how to have a successful relationship, you may do, we talked about that earlier, mirror that type of relationship, dysfunctional relationship, by mistreating women because you saw that in your own home. So an ACEs study is very prominent these days.
This is very interesting information. So when you talk about this stress response that's turned on, and it makes so much sense. Now you've gone through this trauma, and this stress response is turned on.
And it gets locked on.
Yeah. So the next question: how do people turn it off?
What the research shows is the way you can turn off the stress. They call it's a big word. It's called epigenetics methylation, meaning when we're under high levels of stress, even in utero, there's a documentary called In Utero. Even in utero, if the mother is significantly stressed, the baby feels the same stress the mother feels. So if the mother is going through domestic violence situation and worrying about can't pay her bills, all these things that a lot of people are going through, and that cortisol and adrenaline is soaring through her body, and everybody's different in terms of the what they call the breaking point. But when it gets to a breaking point where that stress gene, it's a stress gene, gets locked in the on position, that cortisol and adrenaline runs nonstop in your body. Now, the stress response is good in the acute short term. It's there to protect us, to get us out of all types of dangers. But when that stress response is cut on in a chronic state, it impacts our body in so many ways. Increased inflammation. It lowers our immune system. When our immune system is low, what happens? It makes us compromise us in terms of all types of diseases and everything else. So chronic stress, that stress gene getting cut on. But to answer your question, how do you cut it off? You have to have a buffer, someone in your life that can provide that attuned, loving, supportive care that can calm you down, can connect with you in an emotional, physiological, caring, nurturing way. Over time, that will cause the body, that stress response, to stand down. That amygdala, that fight or flight part of our brain that gets activated when we're aroused, it will stand down, and then the chemicals like oxytocin, which is the love hormone, and dopamine, those types of chemicals can become more abundant in our brains and in our body.
Woo.
But we have to be in a very nurturing, buffering, loving relationship for a sustained period of time to offset all the trauma. So if you're in a relationship where every day is fighting and all types of problems and worrying, you never give your body time to catch
Calm
up, for
down.
homeostasis to come back.
Oh my goodness. And guys, this is things that we really need to pay attention to. Because you look at things like this, and I notice I have talked to people that have had cancer,
Mhm.
people that have had MS, people that have had different kind of diseases and things like that, and they were sparked or flared when they had a very serious bout of stress.
Yes.
And just learning, you guys, the great thing about what Darryl is saying tonight is that if you are going through depression and anxiety, we all can flourish.
Yes, we can flourish. No.
And to be honest with you guys, and I want to see in the comments, I want to hear from you guys. If you guys have any questions, I know this is an informative show. But if you guys have questions, let me know. But how many of you all have even been familiarized with the word flourish? And just pertaining to our community,
yes. Yeah.
that's not a word that I hear.
Right. Right.
And it drives me.
Yes.
Flourishing is the goal.
Yes.
Flourishing means that you're not just making it day to day. It means that you're living a fulfilling life. And how many of you all don't do certain things because of fear? Like, it's many people that don't travel
Right.
there.
Right.
People
Right.
don't travel because they're scared they're going to get on an
Yeah.
airplane.
I was one of those people. I hate to fly, but because of my anxiety. But I forced myself. We only got one life, guys. This is not a dress rehearsal. So my mantra is face your fear, and your fear will disappear. I get on planes now, even though I hate it. I force myself to do it because when I leave this planet, I don't want to have any regrets. There's a book called The Five Regrets of the Dying, and one of those regrets is people are afraid to take risks. Don't be afraid to take risks. Live life abundantly. Live life and take chances. Positive risk, not negative risk. Risk that's going to help you to flourish, like you said.
And that, like I said, that is just something big. If you guys have situations that or things that are keeping you from doing certain things, address those things and don't be ashamed to get help. I mean, because we need help, and calling your friend and your buddy just to vent is not always going to be enough. Sometimes we need to call people that can give us feedback and help us through these things. And sometimes medication is needed, but in a lot of cases, though, I see people get healed by just conversation.
That's road. The research shows that's one of the number one interventions in terms of this doesn't cost any money. You don't have to see a therapist necessarily, but having a friend that's attuned, meaning attuned to you, really understanding how you feeling, girl, how you feeling, guy. I'm there for you, knowing that this person is my ride or die. They got my back. When you have someone like that, it takes a lot of stress off of you versus you thinking you are dealing with all these things on your own. You got all these stresses on your back. But when you have that one person that's consistent and maintain that type of friendship, that buffer, if you will, it goes a long way in supporting you. And so we all should have a buffer. We all should have someone. If you don't, then you have to supplement or replace that lack of a person with professional therapy, what they call find a therapist that you can have a therapeutic alliance with. I'm a therapist. I love being a therapist. I love connecting with people and coming on teletherapy and supporting people. And invariably, most of all of my clients that I talk to in therapy, they always say to me, I really enjoy talking to you. Why? Because we are social creatures. We need to be together. And that's why COVID 19 was so hard for everybody, because one of the things that help us thrive and flourish and succeed the most is being together. Our social brains have to interact and see each other to connect with each other. And when we don't have that social connection, it creates isolation, loneliness. And that's one of the number one causes of depression today is people feeling isolated and not having a personal connection with another human being.
Okay, I have a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are some people that say that they love to be alone, like for extended periods of time. Do you think that sometimes that can be a healthy thing?
That's different. If someone voluntarily wants to be to have that type of time to themselves without human contact, that's fine because they don't feel that same degree of feeling isolated or not getting the support and love. That's a voluntary thing. And I'm one of those people. I can go off and be alone and read. And I love that time to just be alone and just be to myself. And I'm not suffering in any way. I'm talking about the people who want to be with people, but they can't because of maybe they're elderly or because maybe they don't have any friends.
What do you think about people that have difficulties being alone?
Difficulties being alone. To elaborate on that a little bit.
Sometimes, there are times where you are just going to have to be by yourself. And some people fear, like I have seen some people do whatever they have to do to be around people because they don't want to be alone.
Yeah. I think that person, those types of people need to really get some insight into why they are having these challenges with sometimes being alone. Because if you have to always be connected to someone, there could be some type of social, emotional, mental challenge, or when we talk about attachment type of history that's causing you to feel insecure when you're by yourself. So maybe they need to just delve into their history, get some insight about that behavior because it's not realistic that we always are going to have someone at our beck and call to be there to support us when we need them emotionally. So the more we can learn to just like self-regulate our own emotions by ourselves in our own space, that's a good thing.
Yep. Now, today I noticed that we have a lot of separation in the house. It is a lot less conversation going on. We have video games. I mean, I have seen video games run the house, meaning that people will be on the video game and there is no serious conversation at all
It's a bad thing.
with the children. I mean, it might be a small conversation, but I noticed there's nothing social here. Right. You might sit together and watch movies together. Again, there's no conversation. Um, what does it look like? How do you know if your kids are going through anxiety and depression? And as a parent, what do you feel like your responsibility is in protecting them from that?
I think as a parent, I don't think very young children before the age of 5 and 6 should be given these devices to use without supervision. The developing brain, the first 5 years, 80% of the brain develops in the first 5 years of life. And during that time, it's crucial that those first 5 years, those kids get all of what they call this Harvard's research, developmental research talk about serve and return time, meaning like in tennis, you smack the ball, you smack it back. What serve and return is when I'm from birth to 5, child need to look in your eyes, need to be held, need to be spoken to, need to hear words, need to interact with you physically in all those ways. So if you give them a device, you're replacing all those natural types of developmental supports the child need with a machine that doesn't have the capacity to develop this part of our brains, which is wired to connect with a human being. And so a child who's getting all that time replaced with a device with a human, they're going to be in some ways developmentally impaired. You might go, oh, my child is super smart. They know how to do everything on the device. That may be true, but what are they lacking in terms of social skills? Do they know how to play fair with another kid? Do they know how to share? Do they know how to show attunement, love, kindness? Can't get that from a device.
And that's interesting because I see some children, well, I'll say it really starts to show up to me in teenage years. You know, I get kids coming to my shop, teenagers, and it's normal for them to come in and don't even speak.
Yeah.
And I can see the discomfort with certain ones. Some of them are just rude,
Yes.
but some of them, I'm like, hey, how you doing today? And you can tell that they are uncomfortable with having a conversation with me.
Yeah.
I'll say, how's your day going? And I'm talking about 16, 17 years old. I don't know. And I mean, to me, that
Yeah.
looks very
I
abnormal.
agree. I believe in another 20 years, maybe sooner, the research will show that these devices, especially given to very young kids, have caused a lot of significant brain damage in a lot of ways in terms of um, interacting with other people, social skills, processing just social reciprocity. It's no way that a child's brain can manage to develop in the way it's supposed to being on the device. And what people don't realize is that the makers of these phones, even to us adults, they embed all of these reward type of systems in these devices so that we stay addicted to these phones. And you know what really stresses me out and really bothers me is that it breaks my heart when I see people lose their children who leave their children in cars when it's real hot and they just forget because maybe there's a lot of going on their minds and just so sad. They leave the kids in their cars and then on the news they say in order to remember your child, put your cell phone in the back by your baby. That really bothers me because are the cell phones we're more connected to our cell phones than we are to our loving children. I got a problem with that, and I'm not saying anything about for those people who that's happened because my heart goes out to them. I'm just saying we need to really consider how impactful these phones are in terms of the addiction to our brain.
They are impactful. And I know because I sit on that daggone thing sometimes and I'm on my phone.
Yeah.
And I mean, on my downtime, I
Mm-hmm.
can sit on my phone on
Yeah.
TikTok and I'll look up and it's 3 hours gone by.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that easy.
Yeah.
You know, and I even see adults play that video
Mm-hmm.
game. I mean, they get into that video game and you can roll on that
Mm-hmm.
video game for hours. My
Mm-hmm.
nephews, they love the video game. They
Yeah.
are on it for 5 and 6 hours easily. And I mean, it's nothing wrong with playing video games and doing things like that. But I think that it's an issue when it replaces sociability,
Mm-hmm.
when you're not having conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, there should be no such thing as you not having a certain level of communication in family now.
Right.
How else are we going to grow? And the devices and things like that, I believe, are a trap for that because it is killing communication,
Oh
dog. I'm
yeah.
telling you, killing it.
Yes.
Parents don't have to be parents. They
Right.
don't have to talk to the
Right.
kids. As soon as they come in the house, as long I can hear the parents saying it in my head, that girl, as long as she got her phone,
Yeah.
she good.
Yeah. I think anything in moderation is good, as long as you in moderation. But when it becomes excessive and you're doing it for hours and hours on end, especially very young kids, I have a problem when I see 4 and 5 years olds on those devices for 3, 4, 5 hours out of a day when they should have lap time. They should be sitting on their mom and dad's lap, being held in love and spoken to, and let them know that they have that secure attachment, so they don't grow up like I did with that ambivalent attachment because my mom just wasn't there. So that device is not going to give them that brain development, that heart coherence with the brain where they feel love. The only thing that's going to replace that and provide for that is the love and support and attunement of a caring and intentional parent who's there for most of the day.
Wow. Now I really want to talk more about your book because of course the show is almost over. We've been
Mm-hmm.
here for an hour
Mm-hmm.
already. Now, this is Daryl's book. It is called I Thought I Was Going Crazy. Daryl, you know, there are so many books out right now. People are saying these it's all kinds of books.
Yeah.
What what about your book is gonna help somebody?
One of the things I would say, people who read my book have told me that it's been life changing. I had one lady say, "This is amazing. What you share in this book and the way that you describe your mental health challenges with anxiety and depression is exactly what I was going through, what my son was going through. No one ever has described it the way that you did." She said, "This has been an eye opener for me. It's going these the lessons in here is putting me on the right pathway to get the support and help I need. She said, I'm glad that you normalized anxiety and depression because I used to hide in fear and shame because of what I was going through. And you made me realize that it's normal to feel these feelings and that I don't have to feel ashamed. I don't have to feel like I'm weak because all of us go through these types of physiological changes when we're overwhelmed with stress.
Wow. Well, you guys, I definitely made sure I picked up more than one copy for myself. And how can people buy your book?
You can buy my book by going to my website at www.feeling, Feeling, crazy with Darryl, Darryl. That's www.feelingcrazywithdarryl.com.
Okay, guys, and we're gonna make sure you get that information. We're gonna put that information out for you guys. But for everybody that's suffering, or I don't you even if you're not suffering, I think that the information that you gave tonight, Daryl, is for everybody.
Yes.
If you don't know what a love attachment style
Yeah.
is, I feel like you have an opportunity to grow
Yeah.
from this information. So I'm going to suggest this book for everybody that's watching.
Yeah.
And girl, I mean, you have been a ray of light since I met you, and
Thank you.
your willingness to help the community
Thank
and to share your story and be so transparent,
Yeah.
it's rare.
Thank you.
And I'm gonna tell you guys, I personally looked at some of the work that Darryl has been doing. Darryl has actually been featured on the Oprah show before and many other shows, radio shows locally. And he is personally stepping into the communities, guys. And I have seen video footage of testimonials, so I myself can't wait to get into the book. I'm gonna read it. I mean, I can't wait to get into the book because I've learned so much just by sitting with you. So, you guys, that's gonna be a wrap for us this evening. Daryl, thank you so much for coming on and making time. I mean, it's blown my mind.
I appreciate you. Thank you, Ro. I think the service that you provide with your podcast, it means a lot. I mean, I wouldn't have been anywhere tonight other than to come here and support you and to be able to provide some information. Hopefully, it can change someone's life. If I could change one person's life tonight, then me being here and sharing my story was all worth it. So, guys, go out, live your best life, guys. We don't have to stay in this state of depression and anxiety. I overcame it. Nothing special about me. I just had a desire to not stay in that rut. And that was 25 years ago. And I want you to have a desire to move forward as well. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, guys. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening, and I'll see you guys next Monday, 7 p.m. on Let's Talk with Ro.